It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my wedding day. You know how people say weddings are full of stress, but they're worth it in the end? Well, I had no idea what was coming. My mom, Susan, had always been a little intense, but I figured she'd relax for my big day. Spoiler alert, she didn't. In fact, she did the exact opposite. From the moment we got engaged, Mom inserted herself into every decision. "That dress makes you look pale," she said during the fitting. "Are you sure that's the right cake flavor? Guests will be expecting something fancier," she'd add. I kept brushing it off, thinking she was just excited. She'd always been a bit controlling, but this felt different. She wasn't just suggesting changes, she was determined to make sure everything went her way. Fast forward to the big day. I'm getting ready with my bridesmaids in a beautiful room at the venue. The hair and makeup team is doing their thing, my dress is hanging nearby, and I'm finally feeling like everything's falling into place. I glance out the window at the guests arriving, and everything seems perfect. My fiancé, Brad, had already texted me from his side, saying he couldn't wait to see me at the altar. Then, just when I thought I could relax, one of my bridesmaids rushed into the room. Her face was pale, and she looked like she was about to spill some serious news. "Have you seen your mom?" she asked, almost out of breath. I hadn't seen her since breakfast, but I assumed she was just getting ready. "You should probably come see this," she said, grabbing my hand. I could feel my stomach sink. I followed my bridesmaid down the hallway, trying to calm myself. What could my mom possibly be up to now? I thought. As we got closer to the entrance of the venue, I noticed a small crowd of guests gathered in confusion. Then I saw it. My mom, standing in the middle of the chaos, arguing with the florist. The flower arrangements, the ones I had personally picked out after months of planning, were being wheeled out of the venue on carts. "What is happening here?" I blurted out, my voice more panicked than I wanted it to be. The florist looked at me, exasperated, and pointed at my mom. She told us the flowers were wrong and that we needed to take them back immediately. "But these are exactly what you ordered." My jaw nearly hit the floor. I had made sure everything was perfect, and now, an hour before the ceremony, my mom had decided to pull this? "Mom, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. She turned to me with the calmest expression, as if she hadn't just sabotaged my wedding flowers. "Sweetie, these arrangements are all wrong. They don't match the colors of your bridesmaids' dresses," she said, shaking her head as if I was the one who had messed up. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We had discussed the colors 100 times, and everything was coordinated perfectly. But apparently, she had decided at the last minute that she didn't like my choices and took matters into her own hands. I wanted to scream, but I kept it together for the sake of the guests starting to gather nearby. "Mom, the flowers are staying." "This is my wedding, not yours," I said firmly. But this was just the beginning. I had no idea what else she had in store for me. I managed to get the florist to stop and return the arrangements to their original spots, but by then, my nerves were shot. I returned to the bridal suite, trying to shake off the situation with the flowers, but I couldn't help feeling like something worse was brewing. As I sat down to get my makeup finished, one of my bridesmaids got a text. Her eyes widened as she read it, and she quickly glanced at me. I don't know how to tell you this, but your mom just had the seating chart changed," she said, holding up her phone to show me a photo of the new chart. My heart sank. The seating chart was one of the most stressful parts of planning the wedding. I spent hours figuring out who should sit where to avoid awkwardness between family members and drama from old grudges. And now my mom had decided to rearrange everything? I couldn't believe it. I shot up and practically ran to the reception area, my dress trailing behind me. When I got there, I saw my mom standing with one of the wedding planners, pointing at the new seating chart as if she had just saved the day. "Mom, what is going on? Why did you change the seating arrangements?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She didn't even look fazed. "Oh, honey, I just thought it made more sense for people to sit with others they'd get along with. I know Aunt Linda and Uncle Joe had a falling out, so I switched them." "Trust me, it's better this way," she said, smiling like she'd done me a huge favor. "But Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We had this all figured out. I didn't ask you to change anything. I could feel the frustration bubbling up, but I knew blowing up at her in front of the planner and guests would just make things worse. It's done now, honey, and there's no time to change it back, she said, patting my arm. I walked away, fuming inside, realizing that my mom wasn't going to stop at anything. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down, but as I headed back to the bridal suite, one of my cousins caught me in the hallway. "Have you seen your mom?" she asked, looking uneasy. I sighed, already exhausted by all the chaos she was causing. "Yeah, she's been all over the place today." "What now?" My cousin hesitated before saying, "I just saw her with the tailor." "I think she's messing with your dress." My heart skipped a beat. "What?" I practically shouted. I'd spent months picking out my dress, getting it fitted perfectly, and making sure every last detail was exactly how I wanted it. There was no way my mom would dare mess with that, right? I rushed back to the bridal suite, and sure enough, there she was, standing with the tailor, looking at my wedding dress. "Mom, what are you doing?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. She turned to me, looking as calm as ever. "Oh, sweetie, I noticed a little flaw in the hem. I just wanted to get it fixed for you," she said, as if I should be grateful for her meddling. I walked up to the dress, and at first, I didn't see anything wrong. But then I noticed that the tailor had already made changes, shortening the hem just slightly. The problem was, now the dress was just a bit too short for my heels. It wasn't a huge difference, but I could tell. And on my wedding day, every little thing mattered. "Mom, you didn't need to do this." "The dress was fine," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "I liked it the way it was." She waved her hand dismissively. "It's just a little tweak. You'll thank me later when you don't trip over the hem." I was stunned. This wasn't about helping me, it was about control. My mom couldn't stand not being in charge of every aspect of my wedding, and she was willing to change anything she didn't like, even my dress. I knew I couldn't argue with her anymore. This was just another thing I had to let go of, or so I thought. Little did I know, this was far from the last stunt she had planned. After the dress fiasco, I tried to take a few moments to myself. I closed the door to the bridal suite, hoping for a minute of peace, but before I could even sit down, my phone buzzed with a text from my maid of honor, Kelly. "Hey, did you approve a change to the cake design?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't made any changes to the cake. It was one of the things I was most excited about, this gorgeous, 5-tiered masterpiece that I'd worked with the baker for months to design. I immediately called Kelly, trying not to panic. "No, I didn't approve any changes." "Why? What's going on?" She sighed. "Well, I just saw your mom talking to the baker and they were discussing changing the frosting from white to cream and adding extra flowers around the base. The baker seemed confused, but your mom was pretty insistent." My hands started shaking. This wasn't just meddling anymore. This was straight-up sabotage. I marched out of the bridal suite and made a beeline for the kitchen area where the cake was being prepped. When I got there, I found my mom, hands on her hips, in deep conversation with the baker. "Mom, what are you doing?" I said, trying not to cause a scene in front of the kitchen staff. She turned around, again with that calm, collected look. "Oh, I was just making a few adjustments to the cake. The cream frosting is so much more elegant, don't you think? And the flowers, well, I thought they'd match the centerpieces better." I could barely believe what I was hearing. "Mom, the cake was exactly how I wanted it. You didn't have the right to change it." She blinked, seemingly unfazed by my anger. "Honey, relax. It's just a cake. You're getting so worked up over nothing. I know what looks best, and I'm just helping you out." I clenched my fists, realizing this was her game. She was trying to undermine everything I had planned, changing details just to prove that she still had control. But this was my wedding, not hers. And I wasn't going to let her ruin it. "Mom, if you touch one more thing," I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand, dismissing me once again. "Everything will be fine, sweetie. Trust me." But I didn't trust her. Not anymore. After the cake incident, I felt completely on edge. I didn't know what else my mom had tampered with, and I was trying to hold it together. I went back to the bridal suite to get ready with my bridesmaids, hoping I could salvage the day. When I got there, the hair and makeup team had already arrived. My bridesmaids were getting their hair done, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Finally, a moment of calm, I thought. But I should have known better. Just as I was sitting down for my own hair appointment, the lead stylist looked confused and flipped through her notes. Did you want to change your hairstyle from what we discussed? I frowned. No, not at all. Why? She hesitated. Well, your mother came in earlier and mentioned that you decided on an updo instead of the loose waves we had planned. My heart sank. Of course, she did. Please ignore anything my mom said. I wanted exactly how we planned it, I said firmly, hoping this was the last of her meddling. The stylist nodded and started working, but I could feel the tension building. My bridesmaids were whispering among themselves, obviously aware of what was going on, and I tried to keep my cool. 30 minutes later, I was in the middle of getting my makeup done when the door swung open, and surprise, surprise, my mom walked in. She looked around and frowned. Why isn't anyone following the new hair instructions I gave earlier? I couldn't take it anymore. Mom, stop. I didn't ask for any changes. I want things the way I planned, not how you want them. She crossed her arms and gave me that infuriating, condescending smile. I'm just trying to help, dear. You're getting so worked up over little things. You'll thank me later when the pictures look better with the updo. I felt my blood boil. This wasn't about helping me. This was about her trying to take control of the wedding, and I was done pretending it was okay. Mom, if you keep interfering like this, you might not even be at the wedding. That made her freeze. For the first time, I saw a flicker of shock cross her face. She didn't say anything, but I could tell I'd hit a nerve. She stormed out of the room, leaving everyone in stunned silence. I sat back, trying to breathe, knowing full well this wouldn't be the end of her antics. But I wasn't backing down. The wedding day had finally arrived. I was beyond stressed at this point, but I was determined to push through. The ceremony was about to begin, and everything seemed to be falling into place until my mom pulled me aside again. Sweetheart, I have something very important to talk to you about, she said, her voice low and serious. I was on edge already, not wanting any more disruptions, but I couldn't avoid her. What is it now, Mom? She handed me a small envelope. I've written something for the reception, she said with a glint in her eye. It's a speech. I think it'll be perfect to honor your father and me. My heart sank. I had made it very clear that I didn't want any speeches from family during the reception. I wanted the focus to be on my husband and me, not on any awkward moments or family drama. Mom, I told you we're not doing speeches, I replied, shaking my head. You know I don't want anyone making a scene. She sighed dramatically. I know, but this is important. It's for your father, and he deserves some recognition, don't you think? I knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just honoring my father. She was trying to make the wedding about her, to put herself at the center of attention. I had to put my foot down before she made any more moves. Mom, the wedding isn't about you. It's about me and my husband. And if you go ahead with that speech, I'll have to have it stopped. She looked at me, eyes wide, before a dark smile spread across her face. Oh, sweetie, don't worry. I'll wait for my moment. I'll make sure it's a speech you'll never forget. I could feel the tension rise in my chest. I wasn't going to let her ruin my day. At the reception, everything seemed to be going smoothly, at least at first. The guests were mingling, the music was playing, and the drinks were flowing. But then, just as everyone was seated, my mom stood up from her place at the head table, completely ignoring the unspoken rule about speeches. I saw her grab the mic, and my stomach dropped. Everyone, I'd like to say a few words, she announced with that confident smile I knew all too well. I felt my blood boil as I rushed to intercept her. But before I could get there, my mom started speaking into the mic, talking about my childhood and how she had always known I would have a beautiful wedding. My heart was racing, but the real bombshell came next. She began talking about my dad's struggles and how much she'd sacrificed to help our family, all while throwing in subtle jabs at my fiancé. It was like she was turning my wedding into a stage for her grievances. I couldn't stand it anymore. I marched up to the stage, grabbed the mic, and cut her off mid-sentence. Enough, I shouted. This wedding isn't about you, Mom. It's about me and my husband. I'm done with you trying to take over everything. The room went dead silent. My mom's face turned red, but she didn't say a word. I turned to the guests, trying to regain my composure. Sorry, everyone. I just couldn't let it go any longer. The tension in the room was thick, and while some guests looked uncomfortable, others looked relieved. It was clear they were tired of my mom's antics too. But as I made my way back to my seat, I knew the battle was far from over. I'd exposed her in front of everyone, but was that enough to make her back off? After I interrupted my mom's speech, the room was dead silent. I was shaking, but I refused to back down. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for the next move. Some guests looked uncomfortable, unsure of how to react, while others seemed relieved, like they were finally witnessing someone stand up to my mom. But as I sat back down, I saw her seething, eyes burning with anger. I was expecting her to throw a fit, and sure enough, after a few minutes, she stormed off to the restroom. I tried to ignore her, focusing instead on my husband, who squeezed my hand under the table. You did the right thing, he whispered. But the rest of the night didn't feel right. The tension was unbearable, and I knew my mom wasn't done yet. I had exposed her in front of everyone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was planning something worse. The rest of the evening dragged on. My mom was nowhere to be seen, and the guests who had been nervously watching seemed to slowly relax. My husband and I finally had our first dance, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe everything would go back to normal. But that peace didn't last long. Later in the night, as the dance floor filled up, I was chatting with some of my friends when I saw my mom approaching. She had this icy calmness to her, and I could tell she was about to make a scene. She walked up to me, her face stern, and in a low voice said, "You think you've won? You think this is over? You've embarrassed me in front of all these people, and I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done." I wasn't scared anymore. Mom, I've had enough. I don't care what you say to anyone else. You're the one who's been ruining everything. She narrowed her eyes at me. I'll make you regret this. You've lost me. I shook my head. I don't need you to control me anymore. This is my day, my life, and if you can't respect that, then maybe it's time we had some space. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, I thought she was going to say something more. But instead, she just turned around and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. It was over. Or at least I thought it was. The rest of the night went on, but the atmosphere had completely shifted. People were talking, dancing, and laughing, but my mind kept racing. My mom had disappeared, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't done with me yet. She was unpredictable, and I had no idea how far she was willing to go to make this wedding about her. Around midnight, after most of the guests had left and things started winding down, I was sitting in a quiet corner with my husband, trying to catch my breath. I was relieved that the day was almost over, but I couldn't help but feel uneasy about what had just happened. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. Thought you could embarrass me in front of everyone and get away with it? You have no idea what I'm capable of. I froze, staring at the screen. My hands began to shake as I tried to figure out who could have sent this. The number wasn't familiar. My heart sank. Could it really be my mom? Was she going to escalate this even further? I showed the message to my husband, who looked as stunned as I was. It's gotta be her, he said, his voice low and tense. She's not going to let this go, is she? I immediately dialed the number, but it went straight to voicemail. No surprise there. I sent a message back, trying to stay calm. Stop, Mom. This has to end. I've made my choice and you need to accept it. A few minutes passed, and I was starting to wonder if I'd ever hear from her again. But then, another message came through. You'll regret this, and I'll make sure your wedding isn't the last thing you lose. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Was she really threatening me over something as trivial as a wedding? I had already put my foot down and exposed her in front of everyone, but now it seemed like she was taking things to a dangerous level. I showed the messages to a few of my close friends who had stayed behind, and they all seemed just as shocked as I was. No one could believe my mom was taking it this far, especially after everything that had happened earlier in the night. But one thing was clear, my mom wasn't going to just disappear quietly. This wasn't over. I was starting to feel scared. Was I going to have to deal with her sabotaging my life from here on out? The night went on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to explode. I kept staring at my phone, waiting for more messages from my mom. Was she serious about her threats? I had no idea what she might do next, but the tension was unbearable. I had already gone up against her in front of all our friends and family, but was this really over? Around 1 a.m., after the reception had died down, I stepped outside to get some fresh air. I needed to clear my head. My husband, Dan, was with me, trying to reassure me that everything would be okay. But just as I was starting to calm down, my phone rang again. I saw the caller ID. It was from a private number. I answered, my heart pounding in my chest. Hello? A cold, familiar voice came through the line. You really think you've won, don't you? It was my mom. What do you want? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You think you're done with me, but I'm not done with you, she sneered. This is just the beginning. I've worked too hard for your wedding to be ruined by your little stunt. Don't think I won't make things right. My blood ran cold. My mom was on the warpath, and there was no telling how far she would go to make sure I paid for embarrassing her. You've already made a fool of yourself, Mom, I shot back. You tried to ruin my wedding, and I'm not going to let you control me anymore. It's over. She laughed, the sound sending chills down my spine. Oh, sweetheart, you have no idea what you've just done. I've been holding back for far too long, but I won't be quiet anymore. I could feel the anger rising in me. How could she still act like the victim in all of this? I had done nothing but stand up for myself, and now she was threatening me even more. I don't care what you do anymore, I said, my voice shaking. You're not going to ruin my life, and you're definitely not going to ruin my marriage. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, she spoke again, her voice colder than ever. We'll see about that. With that, the line went dead. I was shaking. My heart was pounding. I couldn't believe this was happening. My husband put his arm around me. Don't worry, babe. We'll get through this. She can't keep doing this forever. But I wasn't so sure anymore. My mom was dangerous, and I didn't know how far she was willing to go to tear me down. The night after the phone call with my mom, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face and heard her voice, threatening me and my new life. The wedding day had been full of joy, but my mom's twisted manipulation had cast a dark shadow on everything. I thought maybe the worst had passed, but that call made me realize it wasn't even close to over. The next morning, I woke up exhausted, my head pounding from lack of sleep. I barely even had time to grab a cup of coffee before I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, I was shocked to see my mom's younger sister, Aunt Linda. She was always the cool aunt, the one who tried to keep things light and easy, and the one I always felt I could rely on. But now, after everything, I wasn't sure if anyone could be trusted. Hey, kiddo, she said with a warm smile, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Can we talk? I stepped aside and let her in, unsure of what to expect. She sat down on the couch, and for a moment, there was an awkward silence between us. Finally, Aunt Linda spoke up. I know your mom's been giving you a hard time, she said softly. I just want you to know I don't agree with what she's doing. My heart skipped a beat. Could she really be on my side? I didn't know what to say. Your mom's always been a bit much, she continued, shaking her head. But this is crossing a line. She doesn't know when to stop. I sat down across from her, my hands shaking. I don't know what to do anymore. She keeps threatening me, and I'm scared she's going to do something worse. Aunt Linda leaned in, her expression serious. Listen, I may not be able to stop your mom, but I can help you. I know she's always been manipulative, but I can make sure she knows you're not going to back down. You don't deserve this. I was stunned. Could my aunt really be the ally I needed to fight back against my mom's twisted behavior? Are you serious? I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. You'd help me? She nodded. Of course. You're my niece, and I won't let her destroy you. I'll talk to her, tell her to back off. If that doesn't work, then we'll take it further. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had someone in my corner, someone who understood how toxic my mom was and was ready to stand up for me. I don't want to fight anymore, I admitted, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. But I can't let her do this. I can't let her ruin my life. You won't have to, Aunt Linda said with a reassuring smile. We'll deal with this together. For the first time in days, I felt a small sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this fight. After my conversation with Aunt Linda, I felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't facing my mom's toxic behavior alone. I had someone who understood the situation and was willing to stand by me. The support from Aunt Linda meant everything, and I was ready to take the next step in confronting my mom once and for all. Aunt Linda told me she would talk to my mom, but I wasn't sure if I believed it would make a difference. My mom had always been the type to manipulate and gaslight anyone who disagreed with her. Could my aunt really get through to her? Or would this just make things worse? I didn't have long to wait for the answer. The day after Aunt Linda's visit, my phone buzzed with a text from her. It's time. I'm going over to talk to her now. I immediately felt a knot in my stomach. My heart was racing. Could this be the moment everything changed, or would it escalate into more chaos? Aunt Linda kept me updated throughout the day. She told me my mom was furious, but that she was holding her ground, refusing to let my mom manipulate her or guilt-trip her into silence. It was tough, but Aunt Linda was determined. She wouldn't let my mom have the upper hand anymore. A few hours later, Aunt Linda called me, and I could hear the tension in her voice. I think we made some progress. But there's a catch. I braced myself, preparing for more bad news. What do you mean? Well, your mom's not backing down, Aunt Linda continued. She still thinks she's in the right. But I told her that if she didn't back off and stop with all the drama, I was going to get involved in a bigger way. I'm not going to just let her destroy you. I sighed with relief, but also felt a little apprehensive. I knew my mom wouldn't just give up, but at least now I had someone in my corner who was ready to take action. I'm scared she'll retaliate, I admitted. I know, honey, Aunt Linda said gently. But if she tries anything, we'll deal with it. She's used to controlling you, but it's time to show her that you won't stand for it anymore. This is your life. It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. My mom's power over me had always been suffocating, but now I had an ally who wasn't afraid to stand up to her. The next few days were filled with tension. I was waiting for my mom to make the next move. Would she try to sabotage my marriage? Would she continue to manipulate me and everyone around her? Then, I got a text from Aunt Linda. She's coming over. We'll face her together. This was it. The final showdown. The moment Aunt Linda and I walked into the living room, I could feel the tension in the air. My mom was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, looking like she was ready for a battle. She didn't look surprised to see Aunt Linda there, but she wasn't happy. The fact that my aunt was standing by my side made her seethe with anger, and I knew this would be a fight. Aunt Linda went straight to the point. We need to talk, she said firmly, her voice calm but assertive. This nonsense needs to stop, Carol. Your behavior is unacceptable, and it's damaging everyone around you, especially your daughter. My mom's face flushed with fury. You don't know what you're talking about. She's ruining everything, she snapped. This wedding is a joke, and she's making the biggest mistake of her life. Aunt Linda didn't flinch. No, Carol. The joke is you thinking you have the right to control her life like this. She's a grown woman. She's making her own choices, and you need to accept that. The silence that followed was thick. My mom's eyes were blazing with rage, but for once, she didn't have a comeback. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I felt a strange sense of power, knowing that I wasn't facing this alone anymore. Aunt Linda had my back, and it was clear she wasn't afraid of my mom. Mom, I'm done with your manipulation, I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. You've tried to ruin everything for me, but I won't let you control me anymore. I love my fiancé, and I'm going to marry him, no matter what you say. For a moment, it seemed like my mom was going to explode. But instead, she sat there, staring at me with disbelief. You think you can just do this without me? I'm your mother, she shouted, standing up. You owe me. Aunt Linda stepped in, her voice cutting through the chaos. She doesn't owe you anything, Carol. You've done enough damage already. It's time to back off. The word stung, but I knew Aunt Linda was right. I had spent years trying to please my mom, constantly walking on eggshells, and it had only led to more pain and disappointment. This was my life now, and I was done being controlled. My mom's face twisted with fury as she took a step toward me. "You're making a huge mistake," she hissed. But this time, I didn't back down. "No, Mom. You are. You're the one making the mistake, thinking you have the right to ruin my happiness." The silence that followed was deafening. My mom was seething, but there was nothing she could say. For the first time, I had stood up for myself, and I wasn't backing down. Aunt Linda placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did good," she said softly, but there was no mistaking the pride in her voice. I felt the weight of everything lifting off my shoulders. I had fought back, and for once, I felt free. The days following the showdown with my mom were tense. I expected her to lash out, try to turn people against me, or at least cause some kind of drama. But shockingly, things took a different turn. My mom started to back off. At first, it seemed like a victory. No more constant phone calls, no more texts accusing me of being ungrateful, no more guilt trips. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I could finally breathe, and it seemed like my relationship with my fiancé, Steve, was moving forward without the constant interference from my mom. But then, I received a call from my mom one evening, and her voice was different. It was calm, almost apologetic. "Can we talk?" she asked, her tone completely changed from the usual bitterness I'd come to expect. I was caught off guard. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure if I could trust her. But I agreed to meet her. Maybe there was a chance for some sort of reconciliation, for the sake of the wedding at least. I had no idea what she was really up to, but I was willing to hear her out. When we sat down at the cafe, my mom looked almost like a different person. She wasn't the angry, controlling mom I was used to seeing. Instead, she seemed vulnerable. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice quiet. "Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I've been too hard on you." My heart skipped a beat. Was this real? Was my mom actually admitting she had been wrong all along? "I'm sorry for the way I've treated you," she continued. "I don't want to lose you over something like this. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I need to fix things." I was stunned. My mom, apologizing? After everything that had happened? Was it possible she had actually had some sort of awakening? But just as I started to soften, she dropped the bombshell. "I know I've been difficult," she said, her voice suddenly more serious. "But I still don't trust Steve. I don't think he's good enough for you." It was like a switch flipped. All the progress, all the change in her attitude, vanished in an instant. The apology meant nothing when it became clear that she still had her doubts about my fiancé. "Mom, we've talked about this," I said, trying to stay calm. "Steve is the man I want to marry. You need to accept that." But my mom was having none of it. "I can't let you make this mistake. I've seen the way he looks at other women. He's not the right man for you." My heart sank. Here we were again. After everything, after all the progress, my mom was still trying to tear us apart. It was like nothing had changed. I stood up, unable to contain my frustration. "This is it, Mom. You either accept Steve or you lose me for good. I'm not letting you sabotage my happiness anymore." Her face twisted with anger again, and I knew in that moment, my mom was never going to change. The person I had hoped would come around was never going to show up. As the days passed, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. My mom had made it clear that she wasn't going to change. Despite her apology, her actions spoke louder than her words. She had tried to manipulate me, tear apart my relationship with Steve, and I realized that I had been letting her control too much of my life for far too long. It was a tough decision, but I knew I couldn't allow her to ruin my happiness any longer. I had spent so many years trying to keep the peace, walking on eggshells, always trying to make her happy. But at what cost? Now, it was my turn to prioritize myself, my future, and the person I loved. The final straw came when I received a call from Steve. He had heard through the grapevine that my mom had been bad-mouthing him to some of our family members. The gossip had started to spread, and it was starting to cause tension in the family. He was upset, not just because of the lies, but because he didn't understand why my mom couldn't just accept us. "I can't do this anymore," Steve told me over the phone. "I don't want to be a part of a family that doesn't accept me for who I am. If she can't respect our relationship, I don't know how much longer I can take it." That was the moment I knew what I had to do. It was time to make the hardest decision of my life. I called my mom, my heart pounding in my chest. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that if she couldn't respect my choices, then I would have to walk away. I wasn't going to let her sabotage my happiness, and I wasn't going to let her hurt Steve anymore. "Mom, I love you, but I won't let you tear apart my life. If you can't accept Steve and support my marriage, then I need to do what's best for me. I'm getting married, with or without your approval. And if that means cutting you out of my life for a while, then that's what I'll do." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I could feel my mom's anger simmering, but I didn't flinch. I had made up my mind. "You think you can just walk away from me?" she asked, her voice cold. "I don't want to walk away," I said, my voice firm. "But I will if it means protecting my future with Steve. I've made my choice." That was the last conversation I had with my mom before the wedding. When the day finally came, it wasn't perfect, but it was everything I wanted. Surrounded by people who truly supported me, I married the love of my life. There was no drama, no tension, just happiness. My mom wasn't there, but it didn't matter anymore. I had chosen my happiness over everything else, and it was worth it.